here. It's such an incredibly beautiful building and such a wonderful night. And I'm just really, really pleased to be here with Kate, whose book I absolutely love, and my editor Lee from Bloomsbury, who's wonderful. And I have a friend here, Emily Schultz, who runs Joyland and who wrote another wonderful book called Blonde. So I'm just like overall absolutely thrilled. So I'm going to read to you from In Calamity's Wake. And the basic story of In Calamity's Wake is that a woman named Miette was given up for adoption by her mother, the notorious frontierswoman Calamity Jane. And years later, the Canadian priest who raised her in the Badlands of Alberta, a very kind man, he dies, and on his deathbed he begs her to go and seek out her infamous mother. And she doesn't want to do this because everything she knows about her mother is that she's a very low woman. And a woman who is known for drinking, for wearing men's pants, for entering battles, for behaving in ways that are not appropriate for the times. But she loves her father, and really, in this moment, she can really deny him nothing. So she sets across on a quest across the Badlands of Canada, and then down through the Badlands of the Dakotas, looking for her mother and finding many, many false turns on the way. Everybody knows something about her mother, but all of that information is untrustworthy. But on the way, she meets many different women who have done extraordinary things. So I'm going to begin with a section. It goes back and forth between Miette, the daughter, and Martha. Martha Cannery was, in theory, was most likely Calamity Jane's real name. And the book goes back and forth between their stories. Martha. She loved cactus honey, could drink a jar dry. She was 6 foot tall when hardly anyone was tall. Her face was long and wide. She had a lantern jaw. Her eyes were small and narrow, but so light-colored that they glowed over her cheekbones. Even as a gorille, she always said. She was too strong, too square, too solid in her back and legs to be pretty. She was 3 before she walked and 5 before she spoke. Like every child, she sketched pictures of her family. She fought with her siblings and sulked when she lost. She imagined herself grown up in the ranch she would have and all the horses she would ride. She was built to ride horses. Her knees turned out slightly, her tailbone lacked the usual nerves, and her thighs were large and strong. Her hair was always dirty, but it was the same dust brown when it was clean. Her skin tanned dark as chocolate in the summer and never lightened much even when the snow was to her knees. Her mouth, which in pictures is thin and ungenerous, was often broadly cheery and quick to laugh. She had scars up and down her back and the backs of her legs from a first unsuccessful romance. She stank of whiskey, urine, and sweat, but so did all her heroes. She kissed the warm muzzle of her horse several times a day and rubbed her forehead on the velvet dare and whispered love talk. She slept outside on the ground to let the moonlight wash out her dry eyes. If it rained, she rolled under a wagon and watched the dirt get spanked. The middle finger of her left hand was twisted from breaking under the stomp of a pony she shoed when she was 9. She begged her father on her knees not to beat that pony. Her voice was lighter and sweeter than you might expect, although it's true she knew 50 words for penis. But she also knew a dozen old-time songs that she crooned over the fevered heads of humans. She dug the graves herself for those that didn't make it, and often she cried over them alone. Only once she ate an orange. It was a gift from a Chinaman she rescued from a bear. She said the taste was heaven. You'll never read all that in a census. You'll never get to see her under the dirt, a little girl square dancing, dodging corn cobs thrown at her by husky boys. You won't find her human moments on any reels of film or on a postcard. What you can see of her are only poses, subject to the decaying effect of legend. She had a favorite gun given to her by Buffalo Bill, but she sold it in an act of drunken desperation. She had a favorite buckskin suit made for her by loyal friends so that she could perform on stage. It was beaded and fringed, and it came with shiny high leather boots. She lost it all somehow, but know this. When she was asked for help, the only word she knew was yes. So for weeks, Miette is on the road on her horse, traveling, encountering all kinds of dangers, looking for her mother, and she's excessively tired. Hours later, close to night, which barely touches down in summer, we descended into the great canal of coulees so deep that when I looked up from the bottom, I saw the raised sides of the riverbed, the sediment stripes of purple, red, tan, and black, and the way they towered all around me, it looked like I was surrounded by mountains eroding underground. We walked along a dry, braided channel made treacherous with ancient debris. Sinkholes gaped at intervals along the path. We passed protruding tongues of solidified lava. A sparrowhawk floated, looking for the little sweetmeats, cheeping in holes scattered across the walls. My horse stepped around rattlesnakes. As we rose out of the valley, I saw a band of wild horses watching us. A shaggy brown and white mare and her foal stood apart. A fort stood on the east side of the trail. It was a rectangular stockade of cottonwood logs with elevated blockhouses on two corners and over the main entrance. The main door was gone, leaving a broad, gaping hole in the front wall, and the other walls had been partly disassembled. Some of the logs were chopped and piled near a large fire pit. "Hey!" I cried. "Hey out there!" The valley behind me threw my voice back. A figure appeared in the doorway. The sun was shining in my eyes, and I could not make out if it was a man or a woman. "Come here," the figure said. "Come here." I stilled my horse. "Come here. I want to see you." I dismounted and walked slowly towards the voice. "Come here, let me look at you. Oh, yes, it's you. You are the one I've been waiting for." "Who are you?" The voice laughed. "Well, I am Calamity." I stopped walking and blinked and squinted, trying to squeeze the sun out of my eyes so I could see her. "Come here, come here." She held out her arms to me. Her bony fingers moved like feelers in the air. She was small and her face was wrinkled and sunburnt. Her little eyes scanned my face. She gestured at the sky and I glanced at the white sun. When I looked back, her features were blacked out. She trembled and the smell of alcohol was strong on her breath. She smiled. Her naked gums were brown from nicotine. "At last, I'm so glad you're here." "Who do you think I am?" "I've been praying for you to come. Follow me." I walked behind her, watching her narrow body. She muttered to herself as she teetered along. We circled the fort to a hole in the ground. It was the mouth of an abandoned well. A thick rope was tied to a fence post nearby, and the length of rope fell down the well. "Go, go, go down there," she said, pointing. Her arms and legs were shaking as if she would collapse or dance. I looked down the well. "No. Why do you want me to go down the well?" You have to. It's a dry well. It's not so far. There's gold down there, a box of gold and bones, the bones of all my children. Go down and get the gold and get me the bones so I can bury them properly. I'll pay you. I will pay you in gold to bring me those bones. I need to bury my children." "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Spittle gathered on her chin. She shook her head. "My children are down there. You have to help me get them up." "No." "You have to." She clutched her head and wept and gasped. "I waited for you. I prayed and I waited for you to come and help me. You can't leave me here alone. Don't you see how dark it is down the well? And they were only children. If I can just give them a decent burial, oh, please help me. I need for them to go to heaven. I don't care about myself. I only need my sweet children to be safe in heaven. They are your sisters and brothers on this earth. You must see how wrong it is for their little bones to stay hidden in a well." "How did they get in the well?" "I put them there!" She turned and stomped in a circle. "God damn it, should I have let the animals feed on them? Should I have abandoned them? I was young and strong, and I climbed down into the well with each dead one held against me one last time, as if they were sleeping. I let them slip, and I promised I would come back, and I would bury them, and I would mark their graves, and they would go to heaven. What's your other name? What? You called yourself Calamity when I rode up. What is your whole name? I don't know. I don't have no other name. I'm just Calamity. Well, who named you? The troopers. I followed them and they gave me a name. Get down in that well! Get down there and bring me my babies! Get down in the well! Get down in the well! I edged myself towards the well and got down on my knees and peered down into the endless cylindrical dark. I took a match from my pocket and I lit it and let it fall. I took a stone and dropped it and listened. There was nothing. Please. Please, it's not so deep. The well is dry. I will never spoil anybody's water. My children are down there and I need to bury my children. I will give you all the gold, but what I need to bury them, please. Oh, please, I need my children. I tested the rope and it held. There were knots tied every few feet, and I used these like the rungs of a ladder as I climbed down. The sides of the well were slimy beneath my hands. I felt around and held on with my other arm. Finding nothing, I descended deeper. There's a ledge. There's a ledge. Feel for the ledge. That's where the gold is. It's all wedged in a big hole there, halfway down. Have you felt it yet? No. I ran my open hand around the wall, rotating on the rope. I slid down another few feet and tried again. I could see nothing. A few feet more, and a few feet more. There's nothing here, I called. Can you see the bottom? Can you see the bones? No, there's nothing here. It's the wrong well. Nothing. No bones. No skulls. No bag of gold. No, nothing. I'm coming up. The rope burnt my palms as I pulled myself up. At the top, I climbed out and faced her. She was livid, stomping in the dirt. I see with perfect clarity what you have done. You stole my babies. You stole their sweet little bones and the money I had to pay for their burials. Tears mapped her cheeks. No, I said. Yes, you have robbed me. You have robbed me. I did not. I looked. The well is deep. I don't even know if it's dry, but there are no shelves, no places money could be hid. You said you were young. If the babies were ever there, I don't think I could find them now. I raised my hands in a gesture of peace, and between my fingers, I saw the little black O of a gun muzzle shaking at the end of her arm. Her whole being was aiming itself at me through the mouth of that gun. I thought of the little gun tucked in my belt, but I could not bring myself to draw on her. I swear I have not robbed you. I looked hard. There's nothing in the well. It's not the right well. I heard a clap, and I looked at the ground and watched the grass and stone get sucked back into the earth as I reached up to hold my ear. You shot me, I said as I fell.
Natalee's book is wonderful, as you can tell, and that scene is very dramatic and a good illustration of two strong women in the novel, but there's a lot of humor in this book, and my favorite scene in it is when one of the women has a conversation with a boil. It's very funny, and there's a lot of humor in the language and in the attitude of the women in the book. So. My Notorious Life, I think you have a small plot description on your seat. It's loosely based on a true story about a scandalous woman who lived in New York in the 19th century. And it's funny about strong women characters. They often have, or women that we've heard of will often have the word scandalous or notorious in front of their name. A lot of history is lost to us, a lot of women's history anyway. And so when I came upon the story of Madame Rastel, who was not French, she lived here in a giant mansion on Fifth Avenue. When she died, she was the richest woman in New York. She was always in the headlines. She was excoriated and mocked for driving her carriage around Central Park. And the reason she was so wealthy is she got rich selling medicines which were known to cause a miscarriage. And these medicines were made of dangerous things, tansy oil, ergot of rye. But when she began advertising them in the penny papers in this day and age, women flocked. They were desperate. They really had no access to birth control of any kind or to information about it. So she became wealthy, and she would perform a procedure if the medicines did not work. And so her image of the day, she attracted a lot of attention in the press. She was called Hag of Misery. She was called Thug. She was called Foul, Foreign, Murderess. When I saw that story, I was already in the midst of writing about a child on the streets of New York, and it seemed somehow it all sort of alchemized for me that this story should be, these stories should come together. So it's really about a midwife, a 19th century midwife who gets herself in the headlines, gets herself in trouble with the law, as did Madame Rastel. And I think of it as a story of a scrappy woman who's searching for family and for love. And I thought I'd read to you from the beginning of the novel. It's a sort of prologue by Axie Muldoon, the protagonist, as she looks back at the very dramatic events of her life. Let me say that Axie has rather a foul mouth. In the text, all of her words are asterisked out, which was a convention of the 19th century. But we do not have a bleeping machine, you know, what I'm listening to here on the radio, so I hope I won't offend anyone's delicate sensibility if I utter these words. But for me, it's all about the voice. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to Natalee's book. It's this voice is very strong. It's about language. So here I was trying to achieve a kind of uneducated 19th century Irish New York voice. I'm fascinated by the way the New York talk is, you know, the D's and those and thems, you know, the use guys that we talk when we're here in New York, and the sort of the D's and those and thems, and the alias guys of the Irish, you know, the musical language of the Irish. And to me, New York is a squashed version of Irish. It took all the music out of it. So, if you'll indulge me, I will read it in this Irish New York voice that I've heard for so long as I've been writing the book. My Notorious Life. Chapter 1. Confession. It was me who found her. April 1, 1880. The date is engraved on my story, same as it is on the headstone, so cold and solid there under the pines. What happened that morning hurts me to this day, enrages me still, though many years have passed. The time was just before dawn. She was there in the tub. It had claw feet and gold faucets. Marble was everywhere in that room, so magnificent. I knew something was wrong right away. When I knocked, I knew. There was no noise of bathing, just that slow drip, that clink of water landing on water. So dreadful. I went in, and there she was, a scarf of red across her shoulders, down her chest. The water was red and cold, with all her life leaked out. A bloodbath. My hands were trembling. Terrible sounds strangled in my throat, quiet so as not to wake the house. Mother of God, she was dead. I collapsed down at the vanity, reeling and keening. I couldn't look, but I had to. The scene was reflected so clearly in the mirror, and strange how it was serene almost. She seemed at rest. The way her hair fell, you did not see the red cut. She was a bather in a painting, so peaceful. But I hated her for what she'd done to herself, even after how I cared for her so long. She would be my undoing now, not just her own. Who would believe a suicide? They would say I killed her. They would write me again in the headlines as murderess, hag of misery, she-devil. How they'd lick their chops. They'd come for me with their shackles and their oakum and their lies and put me away for good, unless by some conjurer's snap I could get her poor corpse out of the water and away down the stairs and out to Fifth Avenue to disappear. It was the very morning of my trial. I was due in court in 3 hours. What could I do? What would happen to me now? If I could change places with her. The thought came to me, if only it was me dead there in the water. I imagined it, picking up the knife. My troubles would end. I'd not be a grief to anyone, if only I was dead. These ideas raced now through the panic. I looked again in the mirror at her reflection over my shoulder, and seen all of a sudden how it wasn't a bad resemblance. Our age was close enough. That black hair, and it was the mirror that morning, the way we were doubled in it, that showed me the way to my escape. Fast I took the rings off my fingers, the gems from my ears. I put them on her. Her skin was wet and cold as fish, a shock to the touch. The diamonds sparkled on her delicate dead hands, on the collops of her lobes. Why, I asked her, silent as I worked. But I knew why. Why was not the mystery. There was no choice. They would come for me. I ran now. I packed a bag, a reticule filled with cash. He helped me with it and kissed me goodbye, both of us afraid. Hurry, he said, you've got no time to waste. My throat closed with panic and sadness, but I left him to it, my husband, to carry it off, to say it was me dead in the bath. He'd know what to do. He took the risk of it. He knew people. He had connections of influence. They'd believe him. He said we'd find each other later. There was no choice but to trust him. She was dead, and the traps would be knocking any minute. I went out the door in a hat and a veil, which was nothing special at our address. Ladies was always coming and going in their veils and disguises, the curtains of their Victorias drawn. Half of them would have worn mustaches or pup tents, anything not to be recognized departing from my notorious parlor. I went east, across 52nd Street on foot. And meanwhile, at the so-called halls of justice downtown, my enemies was coiled snakes lying in wait. How eager they was to see me in the dock at last. How disappointed, how outraged they would be to receive a telegram from my lawyer with the news. The case was a bust. Stop. The accused was dead. Stop. At first they scoffed and pshawed under their preposterous hairy mustaches. It was somebody's idea of a joke, they said. They noted the date, April 1st. They were sure that soon I would show up so they could smite me with their sanctimony and their outrage. But I did not show up. The bastards was stunned out of what wits they had, which was not many. In the end, they celebrated, they bragged. They got me, was their feeling. Finally, they got me. They said I would take my secrets to the grave. They should be so lucky. The grave under the white pines at Sleepy Hollow has its own secrets. She died to keep hers safe. But I'm damned if I'll keep mine. Here they are, written out from the beginning, from the time of my early life.
and up till now. And as for them cocksuckers, I have just one thing to say. April Fool.